Yes.
Got it.
I want
Okay.
to, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to this meeting today. We have a very special guest, Mr. Tarik Rahmani, who will give us an overview and status of the uh, city budget and process that he's involved in and is actually heading, I believe. Uh, the chamber and the city is very interested in working together to enhance the business progress for the city of Carson. There's a lot of businesses that have suffered and currently are suffering as a result of the COVID pandemic. So it's important that both city and the chamber work together in advancing the economic well-being of the city. We know that the city, running a city is not easy. There's a lot of challenges, and the business community will be in the forefront. And we have economic committee that's chaired by Mr. Michael Stewart that is doing an excellent job in getting us to work closer together. So I want to thank Mr. Stewart for the leadership he's shown. Keep doing the good work, Mike. We appreciate it. And with that said, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Carson Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Committee meeting on Tuesday, January 25th today. The Carson Chamber will have an honor to have Tarik Rahmani, Director of the City of Carson, California, Director of Finance. As Director of Finance at the City of Carson, Tarik manages the city's financial operations with primary purpose of acting as the financial steward for the public and to provide a wide variety of support functions generally encompassed by finance, administration, automation, and communication. His department provides support throughout the organization and assists members of the public with the city services and information. First of all, I will talk a little bit about our chamber, and I'm glad to have you all here this morning. My chairman's report is very simple today. It's almost a three-part informational purpose. First of all, the city of Carson, in talking to our chairman years ago, we said that we want to have a vision. So I researched Habakkuk 2:2 and in the Bible, and he says, write a vision and make it plain and put it on a tablet so you can run with it and read it. So we decided that we would run with the tablet and say simply, showcase Carson. And that's what we're here today, to showcase Carson and how it operates financially. Our methodology is simple. One, information, acquiring knowledge and facts. That's what we're doing. Aspiration. We would like to get desire for advancement in our city, not just getting along, but advancement purposefully. And our methodology would also include inspiration. And I will feel that I will be inspired in all of you with hearing the leadership activity of our Director of Finance. We believe that in development, it's a part of all of us, a concerted effort to increase the economic viability of the community of Carson, both with business, with the city government, and with also the wonderful college that we have here, university, and also with the community and church community to improve the economic viability of the city. I'm pleased to have and introduce Tarik Rahmani, Director of Finance for the city. He'll show us about the purpose and the process, and we can ask him some questions on specific things, especially on the number of issues with ways of finance and how we're financing the city. Tarik, are you available to speak? And I'll like to introduce you to the community and also to our committee and our supporters, and then you can go from there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tarik Rahmani. Thank you for having me here today. I also want to echo what Mr. Sword said. My presence here today is to start a very much needed dialogue on the public-private partnership. You all do amazing work in the city of Carson and every organization you work with. And I think it's about time we can start bridging that gap and working together into the benefit of the city of Carson residents and businesses. My goal again today is to share with you some very high level PowerPoint presentation. And I don't really have to go through all of it. You can stop me at any stage of the presentation at any time. Just let me know the question, and I'm hoping we can make this more of a conversation because it's not only what my goal is to have you take a few things with you for what the process is and what the finances is. It's also important for me to take very valuable and important input from your side, so that can help improve the city's use of the financial resources as well as the budget. So I'm really excited to be here today and hoping that there will be a start for more to come.
Thank you. Here to listen to you. All right. My first question I would like to ask is, tell me about the general analysis of the budget process. What is the budget process in the city and how much money we have on the books just in the budget? Then I'll ask you some more specifics.
Very good question. If you want, I can share my PowerPoint. I think there's a slide or two that addresses your question. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you all, and I'll go through it. And please feel free to ask any questions at any stage of the slides. So let me do that now. You see the slides?
Yeah.
Very good. So thank you again for the invitation. The goal of this presentation is to give you an overview of the city's finance as well as the budget for next fiscal year. And before I go there, I want to share this slide with you, which is the foundation of what we're trying to do at the city of Carson. Next month, it will mark my third year with the city of Carson. And last year was a monumental step for us as an organization where we were able to establish a structurally balanced budget for the first time in decades. What I mean by that is we are now balancing a budget by meaning that the expenditures are now equal to the revenues that the city receives. Before, the expenditures were now balanced, and we used to use one-time money to bridge the gap. So we are determined to continue this very important principle of financial management. The second thing is my team and the executive team and also staff, we are utilizing data analytics to make sure that the budget is reflective of the city's operational needs. We look at the data from the revenues, from the expenditures. We look at economic indicators from the city, the state, as well as the nation, as far as GDP, economic forecast. We gather all this information now to drive the budget process and make that information at the hands of the council so they can make decisions on where the money should be allocated. The third principle is to always continue to maintain a healthy general fund reserve. And that's one of the things that now it makes Carson an exception in the South Bay in the last 2 or 3 years, as we have been exceeding the 20% reserve fund. And I have a slide that's going to illustrate that in dollars. What that means basically is that the city has a very healthy reserve fund. And we are also planning to give some ideas to the city council on how to reallocate the budget surplus. And the last one is, as you also probably know, that the city council, I worked with the city manager directly to establish for the first time ever what we call the city's council priorities. These priorities have been developed through workshops, and the council established about, I would say, 11 priorities that drives the budget. As you can see them here listed, number one is the quality of life improvement. So we're looking at everything that impacts our resident, from parks, from transportation, access to transportation, as well as Wi-Fi. The second element is economic development. And all of these elements right here have been attached to our budget. So the question, Mr. Stewart, you said, so what's our budget process? How are we gonna, when are we gonna start and where are we gonna end? The budget process honestly never stops and never ends. I think throughout the year, we look at the financial situation of the city. We look at the current budget, how we're spending the money, how much we're spending. Are there any projections or forecasts that impact our revenues, sales tax or property tax? And the budget formally starts with the city council in March. So right now, we're preparing for the first budget workshop, which will take March 15. On March 15, the goal is to give a macro, comprehensive level of revenue forecast to the city council. And that includes general fund taxes like sales tax, property tax, Measure K tax, oil business tax, the franchise tax. We're also going to look at special revenue forecasts, and that's the gas tax, grants, and all the revenues we receive from the state or the federal government, and the one-time revenue. And one of them, as you will probably ask later, is what we're doing with the ARPA fund, the American Rescue Plan Fund, which is about $17 million. So in March, we are going to designate the entire workshop to analyze and understand how much money the city really have for the next fiscal year. On April 19, then we're going to start thinking and diving into the expenditures. The number one driving expenditures are always the operating expense of the city hall. And that includes personnel, the sheriff's contract, and other major contract that we have, the city attorney's contract. All these major expenditures, we gather information to see if next fiscal year is going to show an increase or decrease in the expenses. And remember, I mean, if the numbers are incorrect, that means the budget is also incorrect. So we look at the benefits, the medical benefit, the coppers rates, and look at information from the sheriff's station, as well as the LA County Sheriff Department. We analyze all of this data, and then we give it on the April 19th to the council. Now, the reason I established this, Mr. Stewart, and to the members of the chamber, is to let the council know on March 15 how much money we have, and let council know on April 19 how much money we need. So the revenue is how much money we have, the expenses is how much money we need. And of course, our need is always tremendous, I think, but then the exercise, as I showed in the first slide, is to balance the budget. We have to make decisions, and we have to make choices on the things we want to fund that has to be equal to what the city is expecting in our bank account as far as revenue. On May 17th, then we're gonna dive into a more important aspect of the budget, and that's the infrastructure budget and capital improvement plan. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go keep going.
Yeah, so on May 17th, we look at the special events fund, the capital improvement fund. fund. And we also sometimes we find that we're not able to make all the decision on April 19th on the operating expenditures. So the council may ask us questions and make us come back if positions needed to be added or some contract need to be added. So May 17th is also an opportunity for us to realign the operating budget. The goal again is to adopt the budget on time, which is June 21st, 2022. There is enough time between May 17th and June 21st for the adoption of the budget, and council can make a request to me and to the city manager to hold a special budget workshop if we need to do additional work. However, to me, since the last year, though, these 4 steps are always been sufficient and good for council to make the decisions about adopting the budget. Now, so let's look at the money. So what does the city money have? So I want you to think about the city's financial resources are 2 variables. The one-time money, which is what you have been saved and what you have in the bank account, and the ongoing money, which is what you will be accumulating next year based on sales tax, property tax, etc. This slide shows the one-time money. What is the state of the reserve fund? As you can see, right
Hey,
now,
you have my keys.
I'm sorry,
Gee.
again?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had to mute someone.
So we're about to finalize the city's financial audit report. And as of now, the information shows that the city's reserve in the general fund is about $60 million. And this is historically the highest in the city's history since inception. $60 million is almost $30 million in cash surplus that the city has on top of the 20% the city policy. So that excess that you see on this chart is the one-time money that the city council and staff will also try to draft a financial plan for it. Now, this, do you have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Go back to that general fund reserve. Is this the snapshot of the money that we have? $60 million that we have. We have 30 million in reserve fund over and above the 20%. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's what we have today.
That's what we have today, not considering that we're still getting sales tax and property tax, those, and we all have expenses, but this snapshot as of the end of the fiscal year we just wrapped up. Once we finish the fiscal year, we got more money in the bank than we're spending, and that's the excess general fund reserve. Any questions about this slide?
I got a question. What are you going to do with the excess now?
Well, it's a very good question. I think the excess money is now going to be analyzed at the city hall with city council as well as the executive team and staff. And most of it is going to be deployed to the needs of the city. I think the city has infrastructure needs. It has identified things such as Wi-Fi's in the park, the state of the parks, potholes, street maintenance. So you will see a lot of this money going, like urban forestry, which is tree trimming and trees states in the city. These are just few items, but we have identified urgent needs of where this money will go.
I have one question on that. Does that $60 million include the $17.6 million of the federal COVID-19 relief funds? My understanding, we have 2 segments. I believe we have $8.6 million already in the budget, and we're supposed to get another $8.6 million either this month or next month. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I want to make the distinction. This is what we call the color of money. This money is only general fund. It does not include American Rescue Plan Fund because that's a separate color of money that has different purpose, different restrictions. And when we heard about the Congress passing the American Rescue Plan Fund I created a fund specifically where we will deposit that money and where we will capture the expenditures for them. So they're both separate. The 60 million does not include the 17.8. And you are correct, Mr. Stewart, because we received half of the money last year, and which is 8.9, and we are expecting to receive the second half of the money, which is 8.9 next month as well.
I have a question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can you hear? Okay. I wanted to ask the finance director, the way we got the overabundance of reserve, how did that come about? I'm wondering now, did that come from because you notice there are a lot of potholes, the tree trimming hasn't been done? Is that because we just haven't been taking care of business and therefore we accumulated this money? Or is that because we got a influx of new revenue that, you know, that we hadn't had in the past?
Very, very good question. And I think the answer is yes and no. You're absolutely correct. Some of this, what we call general fund savings, happens through two-part equation variables, basically. Number one is there were certain projects where we either did not complete the work and therefore the money still sit there for those projects that I mentioned to you. And some of this money is also as a result, for instance, to personnel savings. What I mean by that is when you
Right.
budget for 5 or 6 employees in the department and you're not able to fill those positions, that money sits there in the bank. There's also turnover when someone is leaving the city and going somewhere else, and that position is not filled. That also creates savings. But also it also speaks into the revenue forecast that we exceeded projection. It speaks on the nature and the fabric of the city of Carson economic structure, that when we forecast, for example, sales tax during the pandemic, we thought that the sales tax will be going down by $1 million or $2 million. However, though, the e-commerce part of the sales tax, which is the online sales tax, etc., really saw a boom. And also that was not ever factored in that we're going to have that sort of phenomena. So you're absolutely correct. Some of the saving is because the project was not completed or done. And some of it is also because we exceeded the projections in certain revenue forecasts.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Rahmani, this is Nasser Wattar from Kia of Carson. First, I'm happy to be part of this forum. I'm looking forward to be an active contributor to the development of business in the city of Carson, so we can lift the city into a better height. One thing that I heard now that's really disturbing is we're saving because we are not doing what we're supposed to do for the city. And that's totally the wrong fiscal policy, where we just keep the money and don't cover the potholes, and also don't hire people because they are, the positions are not redundant, or nobody is willing to fill them. I mean, this means that there is a continuous deterioration of the city. Instead, we should be encouraging people or businesses to come to the city and develop here, so we can move with the city to a different position than what we are in. The other thing, I'd like to see where this money is going to be now allocated, and the city officials needs to receive from this forum some proposals on how we can use that as an investment to grow the business within the city, so everybody flourishes later on. If we don't invest today, and I'm not talking investing in the stock market, of course, I'm talking about investing in the city, the streets, the cleanliness, the all the issues that are related to making the city look attractive for potential developers, investors to come here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the comment. I think that's the essence of this meeting, is to have a courageous conversation about the city's financial state as well as the operational state. I want to also say that I kind of agree, and as well I disagree in certain elements of your comment. One of them, I agree that project hasn't been completed and positions have been unfilled, turnover, retirement. All of that is a reality. But I don't think it's very specific to Carson, and I really want to make certain that the last year and a half or 2 years during the pandemic, it really shifted the workplace environments, whether it's public or private, and nationwide. I think you guys heard about the Great Resignation, and you heard about whether the unemployment benefit, the extra unemployment benefit that the federal government gave, the $600 on top, kind of put certain individuals not being attracted to go back to work. Some employees and some employers are rethinking the workplace. Are we going to go back to normal? Did COVID really interrupted the format of the workplace, whether they're working from home or certain things? These are all realities that COVID has really pushed together, not only for Carson, for other cities. And I can assure you one thing, like with the city council and staff, we're seriously thinking about this element of how we can deliver the services to Carson. What I mean by that is we are looking at fill-in positions as immediately as possible.
Mr. Rahmani, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
I don't want to use this forum to go back and forth and argue about the issues. But you might know that probably we are one of the largest employers in the city of Carson, well, as far as a business is concerned. And I can tell you we were able to navigate through the pandemic. Although the city of Los Angeles have put some ridiculous restrictions on our business, we were able to navigate and flourish. And I think we are one of the highest paying entity in taxes, on sales tax for the city of Carson, which we are proud of. We can look at it two ways, wait and see what happens. So we're like a sitting duck, or see how we can encourage talent to come and join the city and make things happen. And I'll tell you one thing, if you think that we're going to be able to hire people into the city that used to make money similar to what they used to make 2-3 years ago, 4 years ago, I don't think we're going to get any talent joining the city. The city requires that we get proactive, pragmatic, good business acumen that will join the city so they can work together with those that are doing business and have them invest more. This is where I think we need to look at. We don't want to end up like other cities where, increase taxes and kill the city.
Oh, now, sir, thank you for those comments. We appreciate that concern. One of the things I would like to say to Mr. Rahmani is that I think the city has been reacting to some of our revenue fund issues. They are updating their state highway user tax funds. My understanding that the status of the road maintenance and rehabilitation account, we're looking at that. We have an update with the Measure K sales tax funds, and also with the Measure M tax funds. And we are encouraged to support the utilities tax to continue that baseline of support. Could you comment on those points, how the city is reacting to revenue fund needs and how they're approaching that?
Well, thank you. But I also want to say that I commend Mr. Nasser. I totally agree with your input. I think you are as good as your team, regardless of the resources you have. And as we look at the reserve fund, and it's a good thing, but it's also an indication of work not being done. So I think the urgency when we go to this budget cycle is definitely going to include some of the element of Mr. Nasser's input, is that We have to put a timeline on the project. We have to put a spending plan on this project. We have to continue to report to the city council on these projects, as well as hiring and the state of the city on a monthly, quarterly report. And I think that's an agreement that with the acting city manager and myself, we're able to establish with the council that next year should be different than all other years we've done. So it's one thing to have a very healthy cash flow and very healthy economic stability in the city, but it's another thing to commit this money into the project we need to establish. So I want to just make sure that Mr. Nasser's comments are very, very helpful, useful. It's one of our major concerns. We don't want to come back a year from now and show another 60 or $70 million reserve. We want to come back next year and say, these are the projects we accomplished. These are the businesses we were able to bring back to council. These are the economic development we have. So I want to make sure that Mr. Nasser, that I appreciate your input, and I totally agree with you.
One thing I also want to add, Mr. Rahmani, first, for us all to be part of this forum, I think is just a good indication of everybody's looking forward for the best interest of the city of Carson. We are part of a philanthropy where we take care of meningitis as a disease. And one of the donors is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And their condition is, we will give you the money, you have to spend it by the end of the year. If you don't, you lose it. So this general fund revenue has to be deployed to attract businesses. And I think we have enough talent around the table and within the city of Carson and those that are connected with us that will help us attract investors, developers, whatever it takes to stand out with the city. We still have city of Carson as a legacy. It's the dump, area because of the landfills and all of that. And it is important that we change that concept about the city. I did speak to Mr. Barry White and the rest of the city officials. I moved my head office from Glendale to Carson because I feel there is huge potential. And we are partnering with the CSUDH and University of Long Beach to train city residents that are interested to be into the workplace free of charge. So we can stand, not everybody is dependent on the social benefits and so on. It's actually because they sweat to work and do better. So that's, my 2 cents today. I don't want to take over this budget meeting or this discussion, but 92 million by the end of the year, it should be, we shouldn't have even 10% of that left because all of it was spent to attract business for the city.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nasser. I think this is really not a debate. This is a very good conversation. I think I want everyone to put their input today at this conversation because the goal is to share concerns as well as share strategy. To comment to your example of the nonprofit on the obligation of spending the money, I want to assure you that we are doing the same thing. And an example, for example, when Mr. Stewart asked about the American Rescue Plan Act Fund, which is the 17.8 million, the federal government gave that money to every city and they will put a time stamp on it, 2 years. You have until 2024 to spend the money. And for me, as a public sector professional for years, it's not only about spending the money, Mr. Nasser, it's also about explaining the return on investment. So you can spend the money, but you have to go back and see what did that money make? What kind of improvement did we make? And I think that's the obligation we are committed to for next year with the city council and the new executive team we have in-house. General fund is going to be no different. The $30 million surplus is also going to be a 12 to 14 month spending plan, and it has to be going specifically to certain areas and certain projects. The same thing as the $92 million. And I think, as they can say in management, if you don't measure something, you can't manage it. So staff have to be able to measure and track and go back and hold each other responsible to how this money is going, where is it going, and what's the timeline on it. So to move forward, I think this slide here, it shows the city's resources. The latest forecast, it was about $92.9 million. This is what the ongoing revenue that the city receives on the annual base. As Mr. Nasser says, sales tax is one of the biggest revenues for the city. And like Kia and other dealerships is the primary driver of this top sales tax producers in the city. Of course, there are other businesses as well. Second to it, it comes to property tax, as well as now we have what we call the transaction and use tax with Measure K. So far, as you can see, it is very, I would say, a different look at our taxes, the different variants there. The UUT, as you can see, which is about 8% of our budget, it goes to about not 8.1 or $8.2 million annually, and that UUT is set to sunset in 2023. So the city council and also the city Carson community have to make a decision about that UUT, and it's very significant and important that money to continue, in my opinion, to be feeding the city's operations. Any questions about this slide?
Explain to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Explain Measure K and Measure M, those two efforts on the city. This is something that they did during the year and the last couple of years to try.
Measure C, you mean Measure C?
Yeah.
Measure C.
Okay.
Okay.
Measure K, Measure M, those two sales tax. And you can look at our Measure C if you have that there too.
Measure K is the transaction use tax that was passed last November. And Measure K is basically a surcharge to the city of Carson's sales tax is 9.5%. Not all of the 9.5% comes to Carson, of course. About 1% of it comes to Carson. Most of that 9.5 goes directly to the state, and 1% of that portion comes back to the city. The highest the sales tax can go is 10.25% in the state of California. So what the city did is the 9.5, the additional percentage to 10 which is about 0.75%, is a surcharge, and mostly is this comes from the outside shoppers in the city of Carson's. It doesn't really impact the residents directly. And the thing about Measure K, if the Carson did not initiate that, any other government organization that operates within the city could have jumped into that, like the LA County or the fire district, etc. So it was about timing. Either we do it or someone else will do it. And that generated about, I would say, right now, about $12 million annually on top of the sales tax we receive.
Yeah.
Measure C is the oil business tax. Oil business tax, which was adopted by voters in 2018. And Measure C is basically a tax that is on the oil industry businesses in the city of Carson. It's not a sales tax, it's a tax on by the privilege of doing business in the city of Carson. And the oil business tax is about 5% annually. We will receive about $4 million from that Measure C. Last year's because of COVID, and I think there was a complete economic shutdown globally, which affected the oil industry and the use of oil throughout the globe. And our revenue from Measure C was decreased by 40%. We do anticipate that this revenue will come back again next fiscal year to about $3 to $4 million, depending on if we continue in this economic recovery, which is so far has been incredibly good.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this issue? If not, we'll go to the general revenue 5-year forecast summary.
So this is a very high level, Mr. Stewart and the members of the committee, a 5 years look of what the city's Carson revenue will look like. We're anticipating next year to be about 96.4 million. But as you can see in fiscal year 2023, 2024, that's where we have the impact of the UUT if it doesn't get renewed. So that will bring the question about what we're going to do with the sunset of June 30th, 2023 for UUT. I believe there are some efforts right now between the city council and business community to come together with a plan of action for the UUT. This is as Mr. Nasser mentioned earlier, the general fund savings. This is the annual operating budget for the city departments, and every department has an allocation. Our highest in the allocation is public works, 19.3%. And that's most of where the work happens. That's the maintenance of the streets and the parks, etc. And it's very, very important, as Mr. Nasser said, that you have all the positions filled and all the projects non-delayed. So there is a relationship between staffing and projects. And last year, I think most of the savings came in from public works, but we are now at this stage, I think we're doing much better than last year. And we do anticipate that the total expenditures to increase next year about 3% across the board to about $95 million for the city's operating budget. Any questions about this table?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that, let's see, Sherry Rep had a question. Sherry, has that been answered? Hope you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I actually do have another question. So I know one of the things that the city of Carson has been doing over the last, I don't know, number of years is they've instituted a development impact fee, as well as creating more of a robust standard for establishing community facility districts and expanding those districts. The numbers that you're showing are in the general fund, but to what extent has the city been able to increase the pots of money through the development impact fees and, more importantly, the CFDs to be able to offset the expenditures to the general fund? Because, you know, from a development perspective, you know, developers are now being asked to join into these CFDs, which means annually they have to pay to offset their impacts to the city's expenditures. And I don't see these CFD numbers being shown in this general fund information.
Very good question, Sherry. The CFDs, I think right now what the city has is interim impact fees. They haven't been established as final for the last 2 years, and I'm still asking the economic development director, and I think there is a process for them to be permanent. They're still in the interim phase. Those interim impact fees revenues are special revenue.
Right.
It's a special revenue fund, not general fund. And I don't have those numbers here. I will most likely bring them next time I do. And most of that money that you mentioned, that I can't totally remember, thinking we are about threshold of $2 million, and most of that money goes into CIP project, capital improvement project within the district of where the money is raised. So you can see some of that money right now, I think, has been allocated to a comprehensive plan for parks and recreation, which we did not have. That parks and recreation master plan is going to shed lights I think Community Services Director is planning to come up with the final report this year to establish a financial plan, how much money is needed for parks, for example. And when those financial information is there, is going to also say how much of the interim impact fees is going to fund this project. I think in terms of the significance of the interim impact fees in totality, the special revenue funds on an annual base, it's about $40 to $47 million. That includes gas tax and other revenues that go specifically for infrastructure. And impact fees, like I mentioned, now are about $2 million. I don't think we exceeded that. I think there is a report on the city's website that is updated annually by the economic development team that shows how much money we have been collecting. In last year was the first time where this money has been allocated to CIP project. The money was collected, but it wasn't, we didn't have really a plan on how to use it, but last year we started tapping into that money.
Right, and that's important, obviously, with development impact fees, because you have a certain amount of time to be able to spend the money. Otherwise, theoretically, you could lose it. But I think importantly, though, is the community facility districts, because those are ongoing. Those are not one-time monies. Those are ongoing revenues that the city is receiving for all properties located within the CFDs. So I'm just curious to see what the growth potential is for the CFDs and how that starts to offset some of the monies that you may be losing if the other measure doesn't get reapproved in 2023.
That's a very good question, like I mentioned, and I don't think I plan to shed light on that forecast of how the community facilities district is going to be projected over the years. I think I can mostly bring that up next time Mr. Stewart is extending me the invitation. Like again, like that and special revenues in general needs almost a session by themselves to talk about them. And I think the city has issued some bonds years ago for certain projects. I think right now we're hitting the maturity of those bonds. I think there is a project coming up to the City Council on February 1st for the use of the final, I believe, $3 million remaining from the bond that were issued on this community district. So hopefully I can share some information via email to the impact fees as well as the report we have. And hopefully myself and the Economic Development Director can join you next time and tackle this topic in details.
Thank you.
Tarik, maybe in April, my understanding you're going to be having expenditures discussing that in April. Maybe we can kind of talk about that in and around April, about having you come back and tell us about those special revenue funds and also those funds from the development fees and how that's clearing out, and also spend more time on special revenues.
I agree, and I think I'll be happy to do that. I will give a word to my colleague in economic development to join me, as well as community services. I think we should all probably get together with you guys so we can talk about the special revenues. We can talk also about the comprehensive master plan for parks and recreation and how's that impacting the CIP project. We can also talk about a project that we are finalizing in March, which is the what we call the fee study, fee structure, whether it's in certain community services events and programs we do, as well as economic development permit issuance and other permits that are going to be structurally changed and updated next month. So all of that is going to change the structure of the special revenue fund. And then once we talk about that, the three of us, we can explain the revenues, but we can also shed light on where is this money going and what type of CIP projects we have.
I look forward to that. I think that'll be great for us in April. So we get time to get that together, and we'll be in contact with you. Any other further questions on this general fund expenditure? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. The major component of our expenditures is always, like any other city, is the personnel cost. And as you can see here, our projection is about almost $39.3 million in personnel expenditures. That's almost 45% of our budget. The second, and here is a chart that tells you the three major components of our expense. Where does the money go? Personnel expenditures is 42%, maintenance and operations is 34%, and the LA County Sheriff alone is about 24% of our expenditures. Now, this is the non-personnel, which is the operation and maintenance budget, a 2 years snap to tell you where the money is going. Last year, we have invested about $1.1 million into public works because we realized there is more needs into some of the operations within the department. And we also, we can see here, there's about $500,000 increase in public safety. And that's mainly coming in from the increase in the sheriff's contract. This is a more detailed chart of the percentage of the money that goes by department. The largest department, as I mentioned, is 23% public works, followed by community services, and then public safety. We do not have a large public safety department, but most of that 28% is gone to the LA County Sheriff's contract. What you have here is basically a forecast for the city's budget. I do have confidence that this year we're also going to establish or adopt a structurally balanced budget. But as you can see, past fiscal year 2023, there is a significant drop into our budget, and that's going to be in relations to what we're going to do with the UUT tax that is scheduled to sunset in June 30th, 2023. That's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Good.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have two questions. First of all, to unsunset the UUT tax, first of all, or to reinstate it, or however, does that require a voter approval? And I think the charter would have it that way. So that's my first question. Or can it be done without voter approval? And my second question is on the sales tax increase. I think it was Measure K. I thought, and most of the voters thought this, that the 0.75% increase was optional. In other words, they were reserving the space, and then when it was needed and we were low on funds or something, then whoever could increase it. So tell me how that's done. I mean, we could knock that off if we're doing, we could lower it a little if our income is higher, much higher, and too much money is going into reserve. So I'd like those two questions answered. How the optionality works, or was it just implemented without city council approval? How was that done? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. William. Good question. Part one of your question, which is the UUT, the utility users tax will require going to the voters. It's a tax that has been implemented by the voters, and it can only be continued or discontinued by the voters' ballot measure. So the plan is we have to go back to the voters either June or perhaps November of the next elections and put a ballot measure. We don't have really yet what that measure will look like. Council will have make the determination, and I think they will this year. And then based on the voters, we will see the passage of the EUP. The second part of the
Sir.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
No worries. The second part of your question, Mr. William, is the Measure K, the sales and transaction tax. Last year, before we put in the Measure K in the ballot, the staff report and recommendation to council was two parts. Either, like as you mentioned, make the Measure K as a placeholder without enacting the tax collection, or make Measure K as a sales tax surcharge, which is the 0.75%. The measure that went to the ballot last November was to enact the Measure K, 0.75%. And no one can reduce or increase that percentage or make anything to it, with the exception of the voters, which is the Carson residents. So any changes to it would have to go back to the residents to vote on the recommended changes.
I have a follow-up to that, Tarik. Ray Aldridge, the chairperson of the Carson Economic Development Commission. I stepped out of away from my computer when you were explaining that, when you had the budget up, but I thought I heard you say something like that would not affect Carson residents. That would only affect outside people or something like that. I was like, what? I did not get it. So could you explain that again, how the increase in the sales tax doesn't affect Carson residents? It only affects outside sales?
Correct. I think the Mr. Ray, sorry, we lost you during that conversation. When we were entertaining recommendation to the city council about Measure K and other sales tax, we had to do an analysis of what the Measure K really is and who is impacted. What portion of that sales tax is going to come from Carson residents, and how much of it is going to come from other folks coming into Carson to shop, whether for IKEA, whether for buying a vehicle from our really good dealerships we have. So we contracted with a consultant who did the analysis and the sales tax structure. And their analysis showed that not only the Measure K tax, but also sales tax in general, and especially Measure K, 85% of that revenue is coming from a non-resident. That's what the data shows. It doesn't mean that it doesn't impact Carson, but it does mean that we have a lot of folks coming into Carson to shop in the city. We have a structure, like I said, an economy that the structure of our sales tax is that way. 85% is, I'm not saying that it doesn't impact the Carson resident, but 85% of our revenue is mainly coming from people coming to Carson from outside the city, doing the shopping for different things we have in the city.
Okay, that's where I got confused, because it was sounding like, well, if you were a resident, you didn't have to pay the additional sales tax, but if you're from another city, you would. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense because I've been paying it and I'm a resident.
Well, I hope the answer helps.
Yes, it does.
Thanks.
That's a good comment. Yes, but bear in my understanding, we have over 40,000 plus people who come to work in Carson. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. The 50,000 people who work in Carson, 40,000 of those, including many of the faces I'm seeing right here, don't live in Carson, but work here. So that means we have a tremendous daytime population influx, which we discussed at one of our recent Economic Development Committee meetings. So, and I'm always happy to talk about demographics and such. We get into that another day. But having said that,
I want to also add something, if I may. I think I heard some very good comments from this committee, from Ray, from Sherry, from William, and everyone else, from Mr. Nasser. And I think what I can tell you is that what we're doing right now is trying to do something different as far as within the city, and also working with council. We're trying to learn how much of impact COVID had on us, not only as a city, but also as businesses. And we're trying to utilize the money to make sure that hopefully, fingers crossed, when something like this happen, we're no longer dealing with the same issues we have. And I think some of the concerns, as Mr. Nasser said, we have to look at the structure. Carson has a very, very good potential. Future unlimited is really true. As you can see from the financial structure, the city has the financial resources to go to the next level, and I think we will. Number two, technologically speaking, I think we have determined that the impact of COVID, not only of how the city did business, but also as your businesses did business in Carson. the importance of having access to a strong broadband, for example, a very good, robust digital existence of the city itself. We don't really need to require everyone to come to Carson and pay a permit fee. We have to be able to exist on people's phones and people's computers and have that digital access. We want to have a very good website that it's in your palm of your phone, that if there is a complaint, you can put it out there. If there is something you want to engage with any department, it's easy to do. And we also wanted to look as, become attractive in the South Bay. To become attractive, I think you have to have a solid infrastructure that looks at your street, your transportation, your internet access. We also need to know how much of an impact COVID had on our kids and our families and access to internet and all of that. So what we're recommending is not only the $17.8 million to look back and see what we can do. We also need to look at the struggles that the businesses had in Carson with their access to cash flow and access to certain, like I said, internet is no longer something good to have. It's now become a utility. It's something that everyone must have. And the city has to play a role of working with you and other businesses to have a very strong broadband structure. So you will see now going to council between March and June, different opportunities and different occasions in these meetings where we are going to bring back a project that speaks exactly of how the impact can be. There are other things I'm also thinking about is to making the budget more of participation budget. What I mean by that is I'm hoping that all of you can participate into making recommendation into what projects we need to go forward. Working with the company right now to do some sort of a survey and pushing a survey out to you and to our resident to start asking the question, what is the most important things you want to see next year? So we're going to get all that information and put numbers into it. And we want to make sure that we're not really discounting also the public-private partnership, the relationship with our nonprofits in the city, because I know the nonprofit do an instrumental role into making sure that our residents and communities have what they need, and we're not second to any other city. So I think I'm hoping this conversation continues. I'll be more than happy to work with Mr. Stewart next April to bring two of my colleagues as well here, economic development as well as community services. And we talk about we talked about the money. Now let's talk about the project we want to do. The project we completed and the project we want to complete.
Great. I see two more questions here. I see Diana and I see Mr. William Coons. Diana, why don't you come in, and then Mr. Coons, can you come in after that?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Diana with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Carson. Thank you again so much for the presentation. I don't have questions, but I do have comments. We would be happy to share some of the data that we found on the impacts that the pandemic had on kids and families. I'm happy to share that with everyone. We've been doing some research and connecting. So again, happy to share that and participate in that process. And also just want to uplift youth voice in the budget process. We're again happy to support with that. And then thank you for mentioning nonprofits. We are large employers and service providers, and we do everything almost under the sun. So thank you again for uplifting that.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. William Coons?
Yes, I have a follow-up on the Measure K. So the negative on Measure K was that it would take the 0.75, raise our tax to 10.25, and shoppers, especially those from outside Carson and even in Carson, because the tax is lower in Torrance. For instance, at Del Amo Mall, I believe it's still 9.5 or 9, that they would go to other places to shop instead of Carson. Have you studied this to see that it has not happened that way, or has it happened, or is it not been studied yet?
It is a good relationship, I would say, as far as consumer behavior, but there isn't a causation. What I mean, it's not really impacting our revenue that people go into Torrance, for example, to shop than here. But there is some very specific items that make Carson specific in terms of economy that people will not be able to go to Torrance and do business there. That's number one. Number two, I can assure you, Mr. William, that the city of Torrance as well, our neighbors, the year before us, they tried to go for the transaction and use tax, and the measure did not pass. I think right now the city manager has also of the city of Torrance made a proposal 2 months ago to the city council in Torrance. I think he requested, based on my reading, about $400,000 to start an educational campaign, because they're planning to go back next November to enact the transaction and use tax, because what they are saying is their budget is unbalanced, not like in Carson. They see a significant risk of cutting their operational budget if their transaction use tax does not get approved. So I do see Torrance trying again to increase their tax very soon into 10.25%. And I don't see that impacting us as far as revenue either.
Yeah,
I have another question too.
Hang on, Bill, hang on a second. Let me answer more on that, because there's
Okay, good.
data on it that shows actually that the 1% sales tax, when it's been enacted, and so there's been a decent amount of time and space to watch this over between jurisdictions, hasn't made any notable impact. So it was a little bit surprising, but consumers are more interested in the overall price. But before that, they're interested in the, when they're shopping in person, their shopping experience and so on. So it's very interesting to watch that. Also, you can see that right now, Torrance is at about their worst financial shape, certainly in decades, if not ever, but they got hit by multiple winds at the same time. On the negative side, they lost their hotel tax because of the pandemic. And also there was nobody shopping in Del Amo Mall for several months. So those were two huge negatives. And then on the expense side, their cost of their police protection has just shot up. And also they're spending a lot of money on lawsuits related to law enforcement. So Carson, using the Sheriff's Department, the numbers are much lower for what I think is actually pretty good service. So we have a good relationship with the Sheriff's Department, of course. But anyway, so that's just an interesting.
That's a good point, Mr. Berry. I think that's a significant component of their increase in cost operationally in the city, including the very high cost of CalPERS unfunded liability that not only Torrance, everyone else is trying to deal with. It increases by millions of dollars every year, and no one has control about reducing it or paying less. It's a pension that faces everyone. And again, like I said, there are some similarities, but there are also differences between Carson and Torrance when it comes to the state of the budget and the financial. We have some work to do, definitely, like you all mentioned today. But I do think we have the component to take it to the next level.
Bill, you want to have the final question here, and then I think we better move on, Mr. Chairman.
A quick question to move on. I would like to ask or inform you that the AQMD has now passed Rule 1109.1. This will require boilers and heaters at our refineries, which we have, and sub-refineries. It will require all boilers and heaters to have what they call a catalytic SCR. So it's a catalytic filtration unit. Okay, there'll be millions of dollars going into a refinery over the next 10 years or so. So what I'd like to ask is, I'd like to pursue some kind of a taxing for the construction, for whatever, either to help them out or maybe grants, but something to help them out to put in this, because this will reduce their pollution by 95%. Well, or at least their NOx pollution. So a 95% pollution will increase or better the air in Carson. Therefore, environmentally, I'd like support for doing this, even though I don't want refineries in our city. So please look into this by taxing or however else can we support the refineries going forward. Thank you.
You're
To
welcome.
do
Will
this-
do.
Thank
Will
you.
do.
this construction.
Now, I'd like to thank you, Tarik. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Tarik? Tarik, I want to thank you very much for giving us the time. We will definitely want you to come back in April to discuss. We find out what about the money, but how we're going to spend the money, what we're going to do with the money. And that's part of the process. All we would like to do is have a public-private partnership because economic development is a concerted effort on the part of all of us. City government, like you, sir, good city government, business, community residents, and the academic community, because we have a dynamo in that Cal State Dominguez Hills, which is going to expand our development. Okay, is there any other questions? I would like to proceed on. Barry has a comment on economic trends, and then we will like to take in any summary questions that you have of me. Thank you.
So I actually have a couple of things to share here. One is I want to talk about redistricting because this question has come up amongst a number of our members in the community. So I'm going to share my screen here and I want to show you the new districts that we have there we go. That should be coming up now. So I want to talk about we have the city council districts, which this shows the current districts. I hope you're seeing this now. That we have in the city of Carson. And as part of and this was just put in place a couple of, 3 years. Yeah, I think 3 years ago now. But every 10 years, we're required to do redistricting. And so the city council is going to have to be reviewing that. And I know they have already posted some draft maps that aren't significantly different from these, but anyway, this is their starting point. So let me turn those off and let's look at the Board of Supervisors. Zoom out a bit. So here we have the new districts for the Board of Supervisors. And so we are part of this district, which is the second district. And so before it was shaped differently and these beach cities were part of the fourth district, which is Janice Hahn's district. By the way, interestingly, at least to politicos like me, Janice Hahn's dad, Kenny Hahn, represented the Carson area for many years, if not decades, I suppose I'd say. But now we are going to maintain the same district that we're in, but whatever else is in that district is changing. So that's kind of interesting. Let's look at the congressional districts. And you can see here that this is the district that Carson is in, which is going to be largely the same as before. So not a big change there. Surrounding communities, though, again, there are a lot of changes. And this was made by all of these, other than the city council districts, are made by an independent commission. So the Board of Supervisors is the county commission. And then the congressional assembly and state districts are made by the We Draw the Lines group, which is a state commission, independent again. So, and what I'm not going to show because it didn't change anything for Carson is the school district boundaries. Those districts have changed as far as the board seats. But again, it didn't change for Carson. I was actually on that board. That was not an independent district, and those results are reviewed by the LA City Council. So Diana is asking, when are all maps scheduled to be finalized? That's a great question. Thank you. All of these maps are finalized and are fact. The Board of Supervisors districts have already taken effect. Those took effect immediately. The other ones will take effect with the coming election. So Congress, Assembly, and State Senate will take effect for the next election, and same with the City Council. So these would be for next November's election. So again, there's our congressional districts for the area. Let's look at the Assembly. Let's look at the Senate first. Those are the larger ones. You can see that the Senate districts are generally composed of 2 assembly districts, is how it's been done in the past. And they've sort of shifted that around now. So this is our state Senate district. So this is kind of interesting the way it wraps around here, including the airport. So Carson is part of the same senatorial district as the airport, which I don't see any problem with that. And then finally, we have the state assembly. And here's where it gets interesting. Let me bring the city council back in here. And let's look at this in terms of Carson. And you can see that Carson is actually split in 2. If I change the order of these. So that we're in now 2 assembly districts. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I'm going to say on balance, it's a good thing, as long as we get representation. I will go back to when I was the city's legislative analyst back in the late 80s and early 90s. And we had Dick Floyd as our assemblyman, and he was in Long Beach, and he paid 0 attention to Carson. So it doesn't matter if you're in 1 district or 2 if you're ignored. But so this will continue to be Mike Gibson's district on the north side, and then the other district, the south side going this way. Let's zoom out a little bit here. That district, you can see, let's turn Carson off again. That district includes most of Long Beach, and the other district includes Compton, Harbor Gateway, and most of San Pedro. So that is kind of interesting. That's where we stand. Again, Board of Supervisors has already taken effect. Congress, Assembly, and State Senate will take effect after the November election. And then the City Council also will take effect after the election, but we don't have the new districts yet. This is just the current districts. So that's what we have. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, which I don't think will take but a couple of minutes, but very important. We've been talking with Cal State Dominguez Hills about an internship program with our businesses. I know that Carson Kia is already working with the university on this. And so we talked about what can we do to make a very strong opportunity for both our businesses and for our students in town. I mean, we have a university. For us not to take advantage of the fact that we have a university right here in town would be crazy. So Tanya Cook and I were discussing this morning. And so Tanya, you want to talk a little about what we came up with?
Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you all for having me here. I have met a few of you in the past. I know that we have been working, of course, with the Boys and Girls Club here in Carson as well. So I'm excited that, fingers crossed, the pandemic is over for us and our students can come and glean from you, your businesses. Barry and I talked about maybe putting together a pilot, maybe something like a Zoom, where you as businesses, if you're looking for HR help, if you're looking for accounting help, finance, marketing, maybe IT, sales, have the opportunity to speak to our students in those particular areas. And then after that presentation, allow them to send their emails, email their resumes over to you, and then you can pick these students to complete 120 hours with you. I told Barry, I hate using the word, this is free services, but this is free help. And my students need your support in doing so. They must complete 120 hours. If you need them to do more than that, I'm okay with that. But in order for them to earn 3 college credits, they need to complete 120 hours, and our students need a place to go. Yes, I work with the city. A lot of times my students are going outside of the city. We don't want that. I want our business students to give back to you, our business is here in the city of Carson. So I am available to come out to do one-on-ones with you, make sure we get you approved, and then allow our students, you can have more than one. Maybe you need one in accounting and one in HR. Maybe you need one in criminal justice or public policy. We have the students available for you. They need your help. I need your help. I need to place these students so they can graduate. It is a graduation requirement. So instead of our students leaving us here in the city of Carson, going to our sister cities, let's allow them to work with you. Barry?
Right on. So I think it's a great idea. And we also want to make this an opportunity for small businesses who otherwise just wouldn't have the availability of these services at all. So I think it's really important, particularly when it comes to like applying for federal funds or any of these stimulus programs, for them to learn how to do their books. So if a student can help them set up their books or set them up with social media and see how that can work with their business. I mean, these are all great things. So thank you, Tanya, for being our partner on this. And you can see Tanya has put her email address in the chat there, which is just tcook@csudh.edu. So it's a very easy one. So that is my report. I could talk forever, of course, being a trained politician and a teacher, but I will stop. So
thank you, Barry. Thank you, Barry. That was excellent. And there is an opportunity. There's been several meetings, several approaches, both us, the office, and also with the city to involve ourselves with the chamber. And that's the business call. But anyway, I think we will proceed with that. Are there any further questions for this meeting? And we will look forward to meeting with you again. And we will bring back Mr. Rahmani in April after he goes through the initial process of developing the budget. Thirdly, we're going to kind of be ending this meeting. Excuse us. Thirdly, our main thing now is that we would appreciate your further continuous support of the Economic Development Committee, and also on the other aspects, our special events, our major things that we're doing, and also this new process that we're going to be doing in getting the students out to us. Is there any other comments on that? Please give me that. If not, I'll take Mr. Kuhn's question.
Yes, my question is around the districting. So his point about districting being okay, that they split up Carson. I live in the part that was split up. So now Mike Gibson is not my assembly member. My assembly member is the one in Long Beach. Now Long Beach might have 300,000, and Carson that goes in that part may have 45,000. Now, do you think they're going to consider Carson if we have a need? No, they're going to consider what's needed in Long Beach. So I anticipate this to be a bad decision by the assembly district, because we won't get a representative that'll support Carson. They'll support Long Beach. And if it happens to help Carson, so be it. But I can't see us benefiting by splitting the city of Carson. Thank you.
Thanks,
That's
Bill.
the district problem.
Yeah, we'll just have to see how it unfolds. And you may be right. I hope I'm right on this one. But you know, we will be keeping an eye on it, because obviously the entire community is concerned that we have proper representation.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending this meeting. Barry, and I just want to say, let's showcase Carson. That's what this is all about. Thank you. Thank you for attending this meeting.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.